The story, American Gangster, was titled Return of the Superfly in New York Magazine, and I believe it was about 8 or 9 years ago. And it was introduced to me by Nick Pileggi. And he is someone that I just admire in terms of absolutely understanding the gangster mind.
Well, I found a story, I should say. I found Frank Lucas about 30 years ago, and he was in prison at the time at the MCC down in downtown Manhattan. And some agents who I knew said, this is a really interesting guy. You should go talk to him. So I got clearance from the Bureau of Prisons and went and started meeting Frank Lucas in jail. He was doing 25 to life in connection with these drug deals. But now he was talking about the people who corrupted him. And I said, oh my God, what a story. Frank and I went out and met with Brian Grazer. And I have to say, he wanted to do this movie. You could see it in his eyes.
I then was completely taken by it. That was indelible in my psyche, and I couldn't let it go. So I bought the story, developed a script with Steve Zaillian, who wrote the script, several different drafts. I was then going to start this movie with a director other than Ridley Scott.
We started with a terrific director, Antoine Fuqua, and Denzel, and Benicio del Toro was going to play one of the parts. And it was just fascinating. It was great. But it's tough business.
And we got about 3 or 4 weeks prior to the start date of the movie, and the studio pulled the plug, and all of the money, energy, and momentum just smashed full on directly into a wall.
Usually you feel, oh God, that's it. It'll never work. It'll never, that's fate. But Brian Grazer, who's the producer, he said, no, I'm not going to let it do that. I'm going to keep, and he did. He kept after it, and we started out again.
I was emotionally devastated by this because it's a movie that I'm absolutely in love with. So I waited about a week, and then I just charged forward again with all of my energy, full commitment. One thing led to another. I ended up getting Ridley Scott to direct it. And then with Ridley Scott and Denzel, we were able to get a tremendously great actor to play Richie Roberts, which is Russell Crowe.
I'm a great admirer of Zaillian's work, and he'd actually called me about 2.5 years ago, I think it must have been that, saying, I've written this thing, just take a look at this, tell me what you think. So, and I sat down and read it and thought, it's a great piece as usual, very well written. So then I thought I'd better call Mr. Grazer, Brian, who I knew but not very well, saying, look, I'm interested in this, I think we can maybe do something with this. What's up? What's happening with it? And he said, let's meet. So we did, and that's it. I knew if I could get a very strong Richie, I could get Denzel back into it again. Because Denzel had been there, and then it got awfully close, and then it hadn't happened. So I think he was kind of frustrated a little bit by it.
Initially, what attracted me initially? One day my agent called me and said, Ridley Scott wants to make it now. I was like, Ridley? So, okay, that's interesting. So we sat down and talked, and at that point he was talking about 2 other actors. As it turns out, it was Russell Crowe.
I discussed it first with Brian Grazer because it was something that was really bugging him because he believed in it as a project, and the fact that it had been so close to being made and then shut down and all that sort of stuff, it was still big in his mind. And my answer to him was, well, but who's going to direct it? Because that would be the key point, And Ridley called me about something else, and I'd asked him if he'd read it, and he said he had, and he was sort of like, he'd love to sort of do that sort of thing, And I said, do you think we're going to appear greedy if we just make another movie together so quickly? And he said, who cares? And who cares? I mean, we enjoy working together. And, I like being on Ridley's set because actors can perform, and the focus is on the performance. And so that's the kind of set that I like to be on, And, I really enjoy spending time with him because he's a true artist.
Ridley, when he decided he'd make the movie, he didn't have very much time to make it because we had to, it's not easy, but it is quite difficult to shoot in all these locations and to dress them all and create clubs of the era and then go to Thailand and make that, capture that in 5 days when it would take someone else 3 weeks.
Facing something like 180 locations and thinking, how the hell are we going to get through that? The best thing to do is just begin. Take each day at a time, day by day. And gradually you're getting through it and you think, damn, we did 50 setups today, And so eventually we're averaging like 40, 50 setups, which is fast. I like working always with a minimum of three cameras anyway. So those 50 setups might only be 25 setups, except I'm covering within the setup. So you're finished. I mean, if you take a little bit more time to prep on 3 cameras, or if it's a big stunt, 11 cameras. And whilst it may take 45 minutes to set up, and then when you're ready, you say action, and you do 3 takes, 2 takes, and is everybody happy? And say, yeah, that's it. So you move on.
Either you're somebody or you're nobody. I'll be right back.
He really gives us a sense of the scope of Harlem. When Denzel blows this guy Tango away, who's threatening him, he captures the whole area of Harlem in a wide shot that you never could imagine. He's got, I don't know how many extras, it might be 1,000 extras. It feels at least like 1,000 extras. He's got 4 cameras at all times, and he's tapping them all. He's got a very good editorial mind. And he just makes everything so present and palpable.
When you're doing a period piece, you want to feel like you're back in time. And it's what better place to try to do that than Manhattan? It's like history is trapped in the city. And, Ridley Scott promotes that. As you can see, his attention to detail is great. And that helps, again, to bring a truth to your surrounding. It's hard enough to have a camera in your face when you're trying to relay an intimacy, an emotion. But when the camera's the only foreign thing, it's easy to forget it's there and get caught up in your costume and your and the sets and everything. And he knows exactly what he wants.
I've shot in New York a couple of times. I love New York. I've done a lot of plays in New York. I work a lot in New York. I lived here for a while and I moved away, but it's great because this movie, even though I'm not on the whole thing, has 160 locations. We've been, all over the place, and it's great. I thought just out of, natural balance of things that this was going to be a nightmare, but I didn't care because it was such a great story and such a great character. Ridley, he couldn't be nicer. He couldn't be more impassioned. He's manic in a way that's not destructive. He's manic in a very productive way, constantly thinking, constantly being able to see through the story. He knows it backwards and forwards, and it's been collaborative. He's a very collaborative guy.
He gave propulsion, force, to a movie that has a narrative that is kind of spread out from different points of view. And you get to see how they work visually, but it's a gigantic production.
That's good. Okay, let's go again. That's lovely. Thank you very much.
You're dressing the street and you're dressing all the actors, and he gives direction to his secondary characters. He does long tracking shots that just keep going. He shoots his rehearsals because he likes the realness of it and he wants to move fast.
Cut to here, comes through in your hands already with intention. Then the next shot will be coming out, glass everywhere. This is a tempered glass that's going to just shatter into tiny pieces like a windscreen. So I got one camera concentrating on Rory, another camera concentrating in the air. We've got 2 cameras here left.
And he was able to also compress what would have been a 175-page script into a real shooting script, because he finds a way to do these very interesting and original montages that cause you to be emotional in the most economic sort of time frame.
This guy came all the way over here by himself. And he actually just hung around for 2 months trying to make connections. He didn't have a connection. He went over there for 2 months and then had the guts to buy this stuff, walk from Thailand across to Vietnam, get soldiers involved, get them to bring it back for him. I mean, he was seeing what was going on with these soldiers. He's looking at dope fiends in the street in America, and then seeing how the soldiers were coming back, talking about the most powerful heroin was over there. So he put 2 and 2 together.
What was happening at that time was, of course, you had all the unrest about Vietnam, and things were wild in the streets. They really were. And at the same time, we discovered this heavy influx of real high-quality heroin coming in. And it was killing a lot of people because the junkies weren't used to the high quality that they were putting in their veins. And that was an epidemic up and down the coast. So while all this craziness was going on about the war, we were losing people because of heroin, which ironically, we later found out was coming from right where the war area was, in the Golden Triangle, they called it, Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam.
Fundamentally, Vietnam was setting up, one of the biggest waves of drug problems which came through and out of the army. So these guys were then coming back into New York. They needed the heroin, and so Frank says, I got to supply the heroin. So it grew exponentially.
I saw on the TV and stuff where the guys over there getting high, the Vietnam veteran getting high for cheap.
One of the things he used to talk about was backtracking. He would put himself in a room, take out all the furniture, televisions, everything, and sit there for a month or so. And he said he sat for a month or two. He'd have one meal a day or walk the beach and just track back. And everything he's done, what he learned from Bumpy, and he just worked his way all the way back. And then he said he worked his way all the way forward to that moment.
And when you do that, there ain't too many people gonna beat you out. You can do just put in here what you want to do. If you really think about what you want to do, I mean, really get it together in your mind. I mean, really, really get it together in your mind. You're on your way. I went over there and went to Bangkok, stayed there for a couple of months and made my connection. They said, no, they didn't want me to go, but I insisted. They took me. We had 28 mules and I think 32 guys. And they had, sawed-off machine guns and that kind of, they had a lot of weapons and stuff. It took us about 2 weeks to get up in there. Get up into the Golden Triangle where they had that. It was all built around, and you had to go through the mountain. When you got out there, they had open fields. Nothing but poppy fields back there, nothing but poppy fields. All the procedure back there where you make the heroin with. We came out there with, I think it was 200-something keys. He took me out to the airport, met some brigadier general, somebody with one star on the shoulder, made a deal, and he got it back to the States for me, and I went to Seymour Johnson Airfield to pick it up in Goldsboro, North Carolina. First time I bought over, I think it was 300, and then I graduated up to 3,000 keys. I could bring that over at the time. They didn't care how much you put on the plane. You give them 125,000. I have paid them much of 200 grand. But once you do that, they don't care how much you put on the plane.
I think that Frank Lucas was one of the toughest guys in the ghetto. I wouldn't want to say how many people he killed and how he killed them, but he's just a really rough guy, and became, a mafia type leader.
If they respect you, that's good. You ain't gonna get no money to respect you. If they fear you, that's when you get paid. When they fear you, that's when you get paid.
Frank combined that toughness with intelligence. He was smart. He was careful. And that's a tough combination to beat in a criminal, if you're tough and smart at the same time, and he was. That's why he was able to build up the empire as he did.
I'd sit and chat with him and say, were you ever intimidated? He said, by what? I said, well, flying into Saigon, in the middle of a world war, a crisis, going to meet these guys who could just as soon as put a bullet in your head and drop you in a hole somewhere, and you'll never come back to Harlem. Were you never worried by that? He said, why? And so I think right there you've got the fact that Frank hadn't even thought about it. Would you call that charming? He's charming. Some people might put the word on it of a sociopath, but there's definitely a coolness that makes a man like that tick.
Those strike forces were set up to try and find out where the drugs were coming from, who was bringing them in, and that was our mandate. Not small stuff. We didn't deal with any street stuff. We didn't deal with marijuana. I mean, if we did coke jobs, but primary emphasis was to locate and destroy these heroin guys.
But Red Top was a wonderful woman. She was my whole bloodline. She did everything. I didn't have to worry about it. All I had to give her 20 keys and tell her what to do, and she did it. She would cut 10 cents and leave a 9-cent change, She was that good. Without my wholesale, that's not kind of my wholesale. Forget that. I'm making $1 million a day in the street. Quality was so much better than anybody else. They couldn't keep up with me. My quarter was like at least 10%. That at least it was. They couldn't do nothing but a 5 or 3 or 4 5%.
We had something called the double dragon. You take one key, it's like 98% pure. Take one key, you break it down, you make 3 keys on it. You know, if you break it down quarter-wise, put it out in the streets, you take one key, coming back like $1.5 million. We got 35, we got 15 crew members out in the street, 15 different crews out in the street. We coming up with anywhere from $2.5 to $3 million a day easy. The hardest part in the world, what it was, is to hide the money. Wasn't no problem getting it, hiding it. The fashion and the girls and the cars and the money that I would see laying around, things that I would see. I'm saying it was exciting. It was exciting to me. And I thought I wanted to be a part of that. I'm saying, and I did become a part of that. Things that I was seeing, I thought that was for me. But later on in life, I found out it wasn't. You know what I'm saying? But I thought that was for me.
I grew up in New York, and I remember those streets where his drugs were being sold. I remember the name of them. I can remember 116th just being packed at night. I didn't know it was because a guy I was going to meet 35 years later was supplying everybody with drugs.
Like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I bet you there was at least 10,000 people out there trying to get. I'm telling you, like people going to the ball game, like Yankee Stadium. That's what they were trying to get to that Harlem. I come out, they were trying to get to it. The junkie would tear you to pieces. You got in there. They ain't no police. They come out there. They had to have a tank, armored tank to come up in there with. I could go out there with 25,000 quarters at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And at 9 o'clock, I wouldn't have a damn gram, not a gram. I got my $1 million. I'm gone.
He didn't want to work for other people. He didn't want to pay a surcharge to other people. He didn't see the middleman as something he wanted to. He didn't believe in that. He had this sort of dream of corporate America, and that even though he was in the heroin business, that the paradigm of corporate America and that architecture was sort of a submodel or microcosm of everything else, including the world of drugs.
When Frank was doing it and selling his dope, and by the way, he never took any of that stuff. You got to remember that. It was a commodity to him. He was so cold and so analytic. It was a commodity. He didn't think in terms of kids throwing it. He didn't care. Let's put it that way. He was just selling a commodity, which he did not partake in. And he loved the fact that people were using it.
It was sold as True Blue in the city and Blue Magic in Jersey. What had happened was we discovered that the local dealers were being forced out. They were being forced off the streets. And these new guys were coming in. And they were selling Blue Magic. We bought a lot of it. And New York was True Blue.
Me and my brothers and nephews down out of Newark, we started our own thing. No dealing with Frank whatsoever. People used to call us country boys, this and that, because I have an ancestor from North Carolina.
A lot of the new dudes on the block had Southern accents. We found out through our own investigation that they call themselves a country boy. That was Lucas's. They were all related, cousins, third cousins, nieces, nephews, everybody. We knew about them, but we knew that they still weren't. Somebody was on top of them.
The signature idea and image of the movie is body bags traveling into America from Vietnam loaded with heroin.
That was me and a partner of mine idea to get somebody to go and build a casket over there with false bottoms in them, to put the stuff in false bottom casket. A lot of guys were coming back then and got killed over there. And we took him and sent him over there. He built the casket. We swapped the caskets. Yeah, I think it was 32 caskets we had with like 4 or 5 keys in a piece. You know, it had false bottoms on it. They took the damn plane apart, took it apart, skinned the plane and everything. And that's when the Joint Chiefs of Staff almost got rid of DEA then, because they messed their plane up real bad, you know, messed up real bad. They didn't find nothing. They didn't have no dog. They're searching, you know, they're searching. They couldn't find it. It was in the casket, in the false bottom.
They would intercept the body bags that were to be buried. Some of them were just heroin, and some of them were heroin with the body. And they brought them out, the stuff out from there every way they could.
What interested me in the story was not to glorify a drug dealer, and I told Frank that when I met him. Frank is very charming, very humble, and he'll have you working for him by the end of the day. He's a force of nature. He's a natural-born leader. As he said, you know, if I had become a doctor, all my brothers would have become doctors. He said, I got in the drug business, and they followed me into the drug business.
Richie Roberts also has a very interesting story that I just thought would be interesting. He has a cop story that also defines a world. It was the time of Prince of the City when there was graft that was such a big part of the fabric of that era. This New Jersey cop just didn't want to take money. He was weirdly honest.
The cop in the story is sort of the flip side of Frank Lucas. And that is that Frank was dedicated to an enterprise, the free enterprise. Richie was totally dedicated to his not taking money. Richie would not take money. He actually turned in a suitcase with $1 million in it.
My reaction was, wow, it's $1 million. $1 million was just a number to me. I didn't know what that meant, All I knew it was dirty and we had to turn it in. I'm not suggesting that there were some that didn't think we should, but we did. Now, was I looked down upon because of it, as the movie indicates? Yeah, some guys thought I was a jerk, but others knew me and accepted it.
I think things like police corruption really bother him from a deep, personal point of view.
Narcotics is the toughest job in law enforcement. I mean, tougher than a homicide. I mean, you're out there in the street. It's dirty. It's dangerous. And you see people driving around in cars that you couldn't afford to buy the fender of. So it does tend to corrupt, and it did. And Lucas's organization in New York or New Jersey could not operate the way they did unless someone was being paid off. And some guys were paid off.
I think one of the key things with Richie is just everything's contradictory. But he has this belief that somebody has to throw the stones. Somebody has to be the agitator. That you can't just let the person in power or the people in power control everything and say it is because it is. And he got that way by being an absolute member of the establishment, by being a Marine, by being a policeman, by being a prosecutor in the DA's office. And he became, over time, an agitator.
I used to go myself on surveillances up around 126th Street in Harlem, somewhere around there. You could see the payoffs being made. And I don't mean to imply that all cops were crooked, but there were certain squads that were. And Lucas's organization in New York or New Jersey could not operate the way they did unless someone was being paid off. Those were some of the people that Lucas gave us when he was convicted and he flipped.
That's my money. A lot of police work's just pure luck. You sit and you stare at an object, and you try and work out how this thing, what went wrong or whatever, whatever the question happens to be. But a lot of it's just luck. And you're talking about 30, 40, 50 people, all relatively smart blokes, all staring at the same situation for 5 years, and nobody being able to work out what's going on. And then Frank Lucas, in actuality, in truth, made a single mistake. He wore a fur coat to that boxing match.
It was in Madison Square Garden, the Ali Frazier fight, and he felt the need to not be underground and be conservative, but to be flashy.
I paid $125,000 for a chinchilla coat and $25,000 for a hat. So they weren't going to beat me that night, just put it that way.
And he went to this fight with a chinchilla hat and a chinchilla coat, and he became identified in that moment after 5 years.
He's talking with some of the top mob guys, and they're like, who's this guy that everybody's coming up to and talking to?
And who the hell is this dude? And Nicky Barnes was there and some others. And I started getting information from a DEA guy in New York about Frank Lucas. It's hard for people to imagine, but there was not great cooperation between the agencies back then. Everybody wanted the credit for themselves, so it was hard for us to get much on Frank. But this friend of mine who I'd worked with when I was a detective told me a lot of things that were going down and told me a lot about the police corruption. We kind of finally realized, after a lot of investigation, a lot of intelligence, that Lucas was the one who was bringing in the stuff.
Uniquely with Richie and Frank was that Richie not only was one of the policemen doing the actual investigation, but when he became a lawyer, he became the person who was setting up the case to prosecute Frank Lucas.
The courtroom was, every day was filled with celebrities, showgirls. Joe Louis was there almost every day. Joe Louis's wife testified on his behalf. We indicted, I think, 43 people. Everybody pleaded out but 9. So there were 9 attorneys and me. And I kind of felt a little bit overwhelmed by it. And when Frank first walked in, first of all, after saying hello to everybody and getting patted on the back, which shouldn't allow, but they did, he kind of turned and looked at me. I was seated, and like a half look and half smile. And I looked at him the same way. And I don't know, it's just a strange feeling. I had to do him. I wanted to do him, and we did.
That was a big trial, and we had every lawyer, every conceivably good lawyer in the country there. And wasn't nobody but him, and he kicked our ass in the courtroom. He really did. He did a good job in that.
He was very proud of being a black man who was able to rise in a white man's world, be it criminal or whatever kind. And now he suddenly sees what he's done. And there's no doubt in my mind, from that day on, in his mind, if he was going to go down, he was going to cooperate. We debriefed him for days, weeks, months probably, about how the drug trade started, how he got his people involved, how the police started getting on the take, who was on the take, how did that happen. Over 150 convictions were resulted from his cooperation. Most people copped out when they realized Frank was going to testify, because he knew it all. Frank was not only charismatic, he was a very charismatic guy. He also was very, very bright, very, very smart. He had a great memory. He would tell us things. Yeah, I remember on January 2nd, 1962, this happened or that happened. We'd check it out, and sure enough, he was right on the money, the date and everything else.
And me, Shorty, my brother Larry, all us, we were the head of the country boys. We were the bosses of the country boys. We were brought here, Sterling Johnson indicted us right here as being the bosses, and then we did time for that.
Post-trial, they'd uncovered about $270 million in strongboxes. Not to mention the properties, the hotels. I think there's properties in Las Vegas. There was 5 apartments in Manhattan. There was apartments in Los Angeles.
It was a gigantic coup for Richie and a big thing in his career. But also during the course of that, he swapped from being a prosecutor and became a defense attorney. And his first client was Frank Lucas.
I mean, here's the man who puts you in prison, turns it around so that all of a sudden you are now, and he are engaged in getting even worse crooks than you were. And so that bonded them. They almost became, though they did become pals. And in the end, Richie was Richie who was waiting for Frank when Frank got out. Frank spent 15 years in prison, but he had been so helpful in breaking down law enforcement corruption and DEA corruption that the Judge Sterling Johnson, a federal court judge, commuted the sentence or let him walk after 15 years.
Then we became friends. I'm a godfather to his son. Great kid. Ray is his name. No, godfather. And that's my godson, Ray.
Hello, handsome.
And he take care of him. He do everything for him. Them to school and everything else.
All right. Doing well in school?
Straight A.
A+.
Their friendship's very strange. I mean, Richie says that never at any stage does he ever forget who Frank Lucas is and what he did. However, this is Richie writing to me, at the same time, I'd much rather have a beer with Frank Lucas than Dick Cheney.
Richie Roberts, I would see him at the back of a crowd. I think he couldn't quite grasp the film was being made about him. And so that was quite charming.
Rich is a sentimental guy. And if he like you, he'll go the last mile for you. He's a good man. I love the son of a bitch, I do.
They're 2 bold guys, I think that shoot from the hip. They were destined to meet, ultimately, and to this day, they're still friends.
Given that this is a completely true story, we were so fortunate in order to spend time with the original Richie Roberts, who told us everything he wore. We based a lot of Russell's closet wardrobe on Richie Roberts' information. For example, he wanted to have that very linear look of the 70s that a lot of people adopted, 501 jeans, Lee boots or cowboy boots, American Western Miller shirts and leather jackets.
Trying to run up and down all the stairs in 70s cut Levi's in the New York heat wave. I did 54 flights up and 75 flights down running one day. And they're so tight around the leg that they cut off this circulation. Yeah, in a few other areas too.
I mean, you could say you could shop this film because everything in the stores right now is 70s. We've had wonderful resources from the costume houses, from big vendors who have just supplied us with the most wonderful original pieces.
I mean, look, Russell said it the best. When I first said hi to Russell, and he was like, "Hey, I'm so glad you're doing this, and this is great. We'll work together, this and that." And I said, "How's it going so far?" And he said, "Look," like this. He goes, "I don't have to do anything. The clothes are doing it all. I don't have to do anything." And it's true, man, because, you know, you put back your hair, you grow a mustache or whatever. That's one thing, you work on the character, but there's something that happens when you put on clothes like this, and you're walking down the street and everybody's looking at you. You can't help but be affected by it, you know? So, Janty Yates, man. Janty Yates. She's it.
Well, I'm flattered that Josh mentioned that the costumes worked for the characters because we had great fun with Josh. We were able to put him in very sharp sharkskin suits, very wide lapels with flares, with colour.
We put a lot of emphasis on Trupo's clothes, and Trupo is, you know, again, in that mafia mentality. That's his shtick. I mean, he wants to look as profound as possible at all times.
Josh Brolin and his gang, the Princes of the City, were very renowned as being the sharpest dressers in their time because they had so much money on the take. There's an image in the script which caught my heart. They come over the horizon and they're all in these flowing black leather coats like vultures. Although some of the coats don't flow, his does, and he just captures the moment of power, all seeing, all being power. The inspiration for the Frank Lucas character came from our initial research that this man earned close to $1 million cash a day on the streets in the 70s. So where would you go? Ridley and I really decided that you would go to a tailor to spend your money.
Everything was tailor-made: shirts, pants, socks, you know. That's what drug dealers had, was the clothes, basically still the clothes on their back.
The chinchilla coat and hat that are so pivotal in the script and in Frank Lucas's life because it got him shopped, really. He normally was very downplayed in his costume, in his wardrobe, very subtle, so he wouldn't attract attention. And he's cursed that chinchilla coat ever since. So we recreated the chinchilla coat and we recreated the chinchilla hat. The day that we shot the recreation of Madison Square Garden's The Fight between Ali and Frazier was probably the biggest day on the film. We had around 800 or 900 extras. A core group were dressed as the original core group. There was a man in a mink suit with a mink cape lined with Pucci-esque silk. There were 6'7" men in cheetah coats and matching hats. There were men in white mink coats to the floor. The twins were in the blue satin coats and the mock mink hats with the mock mink collars. And we just actually took one character and just made twins of them. That was our own input. Billy Dowd, our extras casting, had actually employed real twins as well. Sammy Davis Jr. was really pucker, looked terrific.